Hello students, welcome to the answer writing program. Today we will be discussing geography from GS1 and the topics would be important geophysical phenomena such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic activity, cyclones, etc., geographical features and their locations, changes in the critical geographical features and flora and fauna and the effect of such changes. So let's take an overview of all the three questions. The first question is about volcanic eruptions, different types of volcanoes and effects of volcanoes on the local environment. The second question is related to the delta formation and the difference between the deltas of Himalayan rivers and the peninsular river, and also why the west flowing rivers do not form delta. The third question is related to climate change, that how climate change affects the frequency and intensity of droughts. So let's start one by one. The very first question talks about the volcanic eruption. Elucidate the causes behind volcanic eruption and mention different types of volcanoes. How do volcanoes affect the local environment? So there are three parts of the question. The first demand is causes of volcanic eruption, and we need to tell about the different types of volcanoes. Next is effect of volcanoes on local environment. So there would be three body parts, or you can define volcanic eruption in the introduction and then the causes in the body. So there are three demands of this question. Let's start with the introduction. The question talks about the volcanic eruption, volcanoes and an impact on the local environment. So we can introduce, touch up all the three aspects in the introduction itself. We can talk about the definition of the volcanic eruption. We can talk about the different types of volcanoes, how the volcanoes are differ due to their difference in the magma sources and how it can impact the local environment. So the volcanic eruption is a specific event that occurs when magma and volcanic gases are explosively released from the volcano. There are three things: volcanism and volcanic eruptions and volcanoes. So you must know the difference between these three things. That volcanism is a whole process of volcanic eruption and cooling of the volcanic or the pyroclastic material. Volcanoes are the proper shapes or the landform or the vent from which the pyroclastic material or the lava flows to the surface. And volcanic eruption, it is a specific event when the eruption is happening. So you must know the three basic difference between these three parts. Now you can talk about that the volcanic eruption happen in the variety of the ways. Like it is explosive eruptions, sometimes there are lava fountains and there are lava flows. It depends upon the type of magma. Then you can also talk about that this volcanic eruption happens in the different style, like Plinian eruption, volcanic eruption, Hawaiian eruption, Icelandic eruption, Strombolian eruption, Plinian eruption. Then you can also talk about that volcanic eruption can be characterized by ash, lava and pyroclastic flows. Then finally, the third part you can touch up here, that these volcanic eruptions can have the different impact on the environment as well as the human population, depending upon it's the size of the volcanic eruption and the location of the volcano where this volcanic eruption is happening. So in introduction, you can touch up on any of the three parts, whatever suits you the best. Then comes to the body part. In body part, the first demand of the question is about the causes for the volcanic eruption. So the very first point is magma rises and it floats upwards due to driven by the buoyant forces, and when it rises upwards due to its low density, then the surrounding rocks it rises upwards and explodes. So the very first thing is about the magma buoyancy, and the second thing is magma contained dissolved gases like water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. So as the magma rises closer to the surface, when this is deeper core, this is mantle or asthenosphere you can say, and this is lithosphere. As the magma rises, in which there are the dissolved gases like water vapor, CO2 and SO2. So as the magma rises close to the surface, the pressure decreases. Where pressure decreases? Because here as we move down the earth, interior of the earth, pressure increases. So what this is saying, when the magma rises upwards, the pressure on that particular magma is decreases. So it allows the gases to form the bubble. And when this bubble rises near the surface, it means the pressure on it is decreasing. So the bubble is getting created. When the bubble increases in size, or when the volume of this bubble reaches the critical point, so it has to blast, because the pressure inside that bubble is getting increases. So this, when the volume reaches the critical point, pressure inside that bubble increases, so it blasts or it explodes, and this causes an eruption. So you can talk about the causes for the volcanic eruption, and then you can also talk about that the volcanic eruption occurs at the interplate boundaries or intraplate. Interplate boundaries, when the convergent plate boundary is there or the divergent plate, so the pressure got released and the volcanic eruption happens, and also near the convergent boundary due to the subduction volcanism happen. Next is about the intraplate. It is talking about the hotspots. So when the volcanic activity within the tectonic plates on the hotspots happen, this is also one of the reasons for the volcanic eruption. Then comes the type of the volcanoes. Then type of volcanoes, it depends upon the magma characteristics, or the where the magma is coming from. So it decides, the magma sources decides the type of volcanoes. Type means the size, shape and explosiveness. So there are majorly the magma comes from the two types of the rocks, like felsic magma or the mafic magma. So on this basis we have mostly two types of the volcanoes, shield volcanoes and the stratovolcanoes. The shield volcano, when the basaltic magma which originates in the lower mantle, it is fluid in nature, so it has a low viscosity, and when it comes on the surface, it flows smoothly. Like when the magma comes, it flows smoothly because it is less viscous and very dense. So it is less explosive and gentle eruptions are there. But these volcanoes also become sometimes explosive if water somehow gets into the vent. Then repeated eruption, when the multiple eruption one after the other happens, it creates a shield-like structure on the Earth's surface, and it forms like there is a shield on the Earth's surface. You can also quote some example like the Hawaiian volcanoes, Mauna Loa and the Mauna Kea. It is the active volcano and it is the dormant volcano. Then comes the stratovolcano or the composite volcano. So when this is Earth's surface, when the magma or the felsic magma comes from the very nearby this crustal surface only. So when the two oceanic plate or the continental oceanic plate, when there is a convergence due to the subduction of the higher density or the heavier oceanic plate, when this subducts behind the lighter plate, this subduction contains the felsic material, and when it submerges in the mantle, it got melted and then comes on the surface. So this is felsic in nature. This magma is felsic in nature, and this felsic magma is less dense as compared to the mafic magma or the basaltic magma, and it has a high viscosity. Then when it comes on the surface, it comes with the blast. So these have the violent eruption because of the thick deposits of the tephra. Then when it comes on the surface, it creates a huge vent as well, and the shape is like this. Large and steep conical volcano built up by many layers and deposited lava, pyroclastic material and mud flows, lahar deposits and tephra. You can quote some example about Mount Etna in Italy. Sometimes very thin magma escapes through the cracks. This is known as the fissure type or the flood basalt volcanoes. Example, Deccan Plateau, Deccan Traps, Canadian Shield, etc. But these are the major types of volcanoes: shield volcano and stratovolcano. Next comes, you need to write down the third demand, that is the volcanoes, how volcanoes affect the local environment. So you can talk about the impact of volcanic eruption or the volcanoes on climate, on landscape, and on the local infrastructure or the population or the communities. So first talk about climate. It changes the albedo of the region because it is darker. So it changes the albedo. It, as we know, during the Earth's evolution history, this volcanic eruption plays a very important role in the creating the habitation zone or appropriate climatic conditions or the atmospheric temperature. Then also comes about the cooling effect in the short term. Like when these volcanic eruption happens, there is a release of sulfur dioxide, volcanic gases, and combined with the water vapor, these forms aerosols, and aerosols reflect the incoming solar radiation. So sometimes this results into the cooling effect of the atmosphere as well. Also, they disrupts the weather pattern. Due to the volcanic aerosols formation, it alters the distribution of solar radiation, so it impacts the atmospheric circulation patterns as well. Next is about impact on the landscape. New volcanic eruptions, it means new landscapes are getting formed, new mountains. Then next is soil composition and fertility. Then talk about this volcanic eruption creates new minerals deposits as well. Then also unique biodiversity with many endemic species found only in these regions. Then talk about infrastructure and population. So when the volcanic eruption occurs, this damages the infrastructure, agriculture, impact on the human health, and the displacement of the population where the volcanic eruption occurs. So you can talk about the different dimensions on the impact of volcanic eruption. Next comes the conclusion. In conclusion, you can talk about the summary that the volcanoes and the role in the formation of the many landforms. You can also talk about the fertility, how it increases the fertility of that particular region, and also how it impacts the environment and human existence. So this way our first answer is completed. Let's see the model answer is talking about volcanoes, then causes of the volcanic eruption, then different types of the volcanoes, then impact of the volcanoes on local environment, finally just a summary based. Now let's move on to the second question. Explain why Himalayan rivers form larger delta as compared to the peninsular river. Also, why do west flowing rivers do not form delta unlike east flowing ones? So the question has two parts. The first is talking about the delta formation by Himalayas and peninsular regions. We have to do the comparison and also why the Himalayan regions or the Himalayan rivers form the larger delta. The first demand is this, and the second is about the western flowing rivers do not form delta while the eastern flowing rivers form delta in the peninsular region. So these are the two demands of the question. So let's start with the introduction. In introduction, what you can write? There are multiple ways. First thing is you can talk about the definition of the delta, that a delta is the depositional landform or it is a low-lying plains, and it creates near when the river tries to meet to the larger water body like sea or the ocean. So this way you can write about the definition. You can also give some importance of delta, about its fertility, about you can talk about the example of Sundarban's delta, and mangroves formation, different types of flora and fauna, their habitation in this particular region. So you can also talk about the importance of the deltas. But what you can do to make your answer more appealing or to fetch more marks is about writing the broad perspective. Like why this question is being asked, that what is the basic background of these Himalayan and peninsular delta formation, why this question is being asked, or what is the background or the broader view of this question. So we can talk about that there are the two Indian river system, Himalayan river system and the peninsular river system, and they differ in the characteristics. And the one characteristics where they differ is about their delta formation. So this way you can create the smoother flow. You are setting the context also and then coming down to the main body part about the delta formation between the Himalayan and the peninsular region. So this way also you can write the introduction. Next, coming to the body part, that why Himalayan rivers form the larger delta as compared to the peninsular rivers. So what are these deltas or the plains, low-lying plains? These are the collection of sediments only. So what we have to do, from where these sediments have come and how these sediments have come here? With the water flow, because they must have eroded from somewhere, that is why they have come up here, and they have traveled a path. It means there must be a steep slope over there. So let's talk about the difference in the water flow between the Himalayan region and the peninsular region. In the Himalayan region, there are the large set of rivers, means the volume of the rivers are larger as compared to the peninsular region. First, due to the high network of tributaries plus higher velocity. So this helps in flowing of the sediments with water at the greater speed as well, and more sediments get collected in the delta part with the more water flow. So the tributaries and the high network of the tributaries and the larger volume of the water and at the higher velocity they are traveling, so this adds to the sediment load. Next is about erosion. So there must be some differences between the erosion capacity and in the Himalaya rivers and in the peninsular region. So in the Himalayan region, why the erosion is more? Because the Himalayan topography is such that the erosion is more. These are the sedimentary formations. Peninsular rivers or the peninsular regions are made of the ancient igneous and metamorphic rocks. So these Himalayan region is formed due to the sedimentary formation. So these are some loose rocks. But these ancient igneous and the metamorphic rocks, they are hard rocks. So the water cannot easily erode the hard rocks. So this is why the Himalayan, due to the Himalayan topography, due to the loose material, sedimentation load increases due to the vertical cutting by the river, also as the sideward cutting. So when the erosion is more, sedimentation is more, greater delta or the big deltas happens in the with the Himalayan regions or the rivers. Next is steep slopes. As we all know that the Himalayas are still rising and there is a downward cutting because it's in the youthful stage. So the river steep flows on the steeper surfaces. But in the peninsular region, they are mostly now the stable part and the slope is approximately a plain level. So when the slope is steeper, it means the river's velocity increases, so as the sedimentation as compared to the peninsular rivers. Next is about the perennial flow. Himalayan rivers, they are the larger rivers and also they are fed by the glaciers and also the monsoons. But the peninsular rivers are seasonal in nature. So these way you can write the differences. Next comes why the western rivers do not form delta. Do not form delta, but the eastern flowing rivers form delta. So this is the question. The very first thing is about the slope. Here we know that the Western Ghats are there, and you must know the topography of the southern India. It is like this. These are the Western Ghats. So the western part, this part is steeper. This part has a gradual slope. This distance is also bigger. This distance is less. So when the river starts flowing from here to here, firstly, there is a huge rapid flow of the water. And for the delta formation, there should be slow and steady flow near this delta formation area, so that the river tries to deposit the material over here. But due to the rapid flow, they just add up to the sea or the ocean. They do not have the time to flow at the slow rate or the steady rate. So that is why there is no delta formation over here. First thing. Second thing, this distance is very less. So the sedimentation, erosion and the sedimentation load is also very less as compared to the east flowing rivers. First and second, these two are the reasons. Then third reason is about the western rivers. These flow in the fault zones. Some of the river like Narmada, Tapi, these rivers flow in the rift valleys like Vindhya, Satpuras. So these are flowing in the rift valleys, Narmada and Tapi. So the whatever sediments they are carrying, they get blocked or stuck in the fault zones only. So that is why they cannot take the sediments to the ocean or the seas. So these are some differences between the east and the west. And one other point you can write about the size of the river. The east flowing rivers, they are greater, they have the larger volume. So that is why they are able to transport the large amount of the sediments. And also the number of the rivers and the tributaries is larger on the east flowing ones. Next comes about the conclusion. You can talk about the importance of delta like fertility, mangrove coastal protection, how the mangroves in the delta areas, how this helps in the coastal protection, how this helps in preventing the coastal erosion. You can also talk about the mineral importance like the continental shelf. These have the high mineral and the resources importance. So this way our second question is completed. Let's see the model answer. Talking about some definition, then why Himalayan rivers form larger deltas compared to the peninsular ones. Then finally the west flowing rivers and some importance about the deltas. Now let's move on to the third question. How climate change affects the frequency and intensity of droughts in India? Climate change and its impact on droughts. Give an account of the various steps taken by the government to manage droughts. Means the second one we have to write about the governmental measures or the steps to manage droughts. So in introduction you can write about the definition of droughts, that deficiency of the precipitation over an extended period of time which results in the water shortages for various activities, groups or environmental sector. So this way you can start with the definition, or you can also talk about the context that the average temperature has risen by 1.2 degrees Celsius. So as compared to the pre-industrial area. So this additional energy is unevenly distributed in the atmosphere and it bursts out in the extreme weather events sometimes like droughts, cloudbursts and heat waves. Because the climate change has shifted the equilibrium of the water cycle. So this way you can start the introduction. Next comes to the body, that how climate change affects the frequency and intensity of the droughts. So the very first thing what the climate change has done, temperature warming or the warmer temperature. Next comes is about it has changed the precipitation patterns. It has impacted the monsoons. Then it has resulted into the melting of the glaciers, and also lastly the sea level rise. So these are the major components that the climate change has impacted. In this, we have to now connect with how these parts impacts the droughts, intensity and frequency. So first we should know what the climate change has done. Then we should connect it with the drought, intensity and the frequency, how this has got impacted. So let's see the first part, that is the warmer temperature. Now the warm air holds more water vapor, and the more water vapor, it means more intense rainfall at one point. And more intense rainfall, more extreme weather events like floods, this also creates the disruptions in the water availability. This also results into droughts. First thing. And the second thing is, when there is a temperature is increasing or there is a warming in temperature, it means the more evaporation rate is there, and soils and the water availability decreases. Soil will be more drier now. So at one point of time, there are floods, and other point of time there are the drier situations or the drought situations. Next is about warming sea surface temperature. And when the sea surface temperature increases, more intensification of the tropical cyclones can happen. Again, on its pathway, it inundates the soil, which results into the soil erosion. The topmost soil gets depleted. Again, water retention capacity decreases, and all the water just is going away in the runoff, not in the percolation of water. So again, the drought-like conditions. Next is about the altered precipitation patterns. This climate change has changed the timings and distribution variability. Now the extended periods of droughts at one point, and at other point like flood-like situation can happen. And when there is an intense rainfall, flash floods, and further disrupting the water availability. Next is about this climate change has impacted the snowfall in the polar region or the higher altitude region. Now the winter precipitation occurs as a rainfall instead of snowfall, and also the colder season got shorter. So these are the ways that the altered precipitation pattern or the climate change has impacted the precipitation patterns. Next is climate change has impacted the monsoon dynamics as well. Now the delayed monsoon happens, and that too monsoon comes for the shorter period of time. This results into the unavailability or the lesser availability of the rainfall over the Indian continent. So also this results into the disruptions into the water availability or drought-like situations. Next is about melting glaciers and reduced snowfall. So when the glaciers are melting at the faster rate, it results into the short term, this results into the floods, and long term, this results into the shortage of water. Availability of the water will be reduced in the downwards or the downstream communities. Next is about when the glaciers are retreating at the faster rate, it means they are adding up into the sea level water rise. So sea level rises are there. When there is a sea level rise, it means the salt water intrusion is happening at the coastal region, again hampering the water availability in the coastal communities. So these way climate changes affect the frequency and intensity of droughts. Finally, the conclusion or also the other part, you can make it as the second demand of the question about the various steps taken by the government to manage the droughts. So the short term is drought monitoring and early warning system, so that the people dependent on the rainfall or for that matter water, they have to take the informed decision about how to manage the water resources, how to take the decisions with respect to agriculture and industrial purposes. And long term, we should focus on the water conservation strategies like rainwater harvesting, groundwater recharge, check dams, reservoirs, watershed management. We need to work on the irrigation efficiency like drip irrigation, sprinkler system, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Then diversification of the crops and the cropping pattern. we must not go for the water intensive crops rather than the drought resistant, climate smart agriculture we should promote. We should also go for the sensor based agriculture, technology based agriculture like drones. So when there is a drier soils, when there is a no expectations of the rainfall, then only irrigation or the sprinkler sprays the water in the farms. Next is about the financial and the policy support like Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, subsidies for the agricultural inputs. Finally, the research and development. Government should focus on the research and development of the climate smart agricultural or the drought resistant crops. Recently, government has come up with the 1700 drought resistant crops as well. So this way you can write the second part of the question. Finally, in the conclusion, what you can write? You can write the negatives of the drought and how you can write the summary in short. You can write about the negatives of climate change, that how climate change is impacting the droughts and what should be our measures. And also you can talk about that how we have to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions and how we have to go more towards the renewable sources of energy so as to put the less impact on the climate or the temperature increase. So that is why they will put less burden on the Indian agriculture, Indian people, and etc. So this way you can write about the summary. In conclusion, let's see the model answer. Talking about the like how India's drought prone area has increased over the time, then impact of climate change on the frequency and intensity of droughts, then various steps the government is taking, and finally, like to address the issue in the short term, water infrastructure we must focus on, improve access to clean water, etc. And in the long run, we have to reduce the greenhouse gases emission to limit the severity of the droughts in India. So this way our third question is completed. So this is it for my side. Thank you and have a nice day and keep writing.